Florida State takes a stand on realignment, or at least on its place in the ACC. What about Clemson? I'm going to talk to you about that right here on the All Clemson Tigers football show. I'm Brad Sankoff, deputy editor over at allclemsontigers.com. Make sure you go to the website and check out all the great work we got going on. Jason Priester just posted today a fall camp primer to get you ready for the Tigers when they hit the field tomorrow. And please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the like button for us. Helps us a ton here at All Clemson Channel. Continue to bring you a ton of coverage, a ton of breaking news, everything you need to know what's going on in the world of Clemson athletics. We got it for you right here on the Clemson Maven multimedia platform. So Florida State making some waves yesterday. They held a board meeting. The president of the university, the athletic director, and members of the board threw out a lot of words, said a lot of things. One, couple of key takeaways here. First, the Florida State Seminoles are not going to sit tight. They have claimed that they cannot handle the difference, the gap in revenue that's being created by the SEC and the Big Ten and everybody else. The ACC is not generating enough revenue for Florida State. Florida State's too big a brand. They've helped carry the league for too long that they can't just sit and get by with the amount of revenue that they're going to receive. You're looking at 30, 40, maybe more $1 million a year at some point over the next decade in disparity per year. So Florida State says, hey, ACC, you got to pony up or we got to look for a way out. This is not sustainable. And to be honest with you, I agree. I don't think it's sustainable for Florida State, for Clemson, and some of the other schools across the country and other leagues that are in the Big Ten and SEC who want to compete at football at the highest level. Pac-12 is going through that right now. Pac-10, Pac-9, whatever you want to call it, depends on what hour it is as to how this goes. But as we sit here on a Thursday, August the 3rd, Clemson's a member of the ACC. Florida State's a member of the ACC. But there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of rumors, and there's all kinds of talk out there. So I want to address some of that with you here for a few moments. I had someone ask me earlier today, why is Clemson so quiet? Why are we not hearing anything coming out of Tiger Town? Is that it's scary how quiet it is. And my response is no, it's not scary. In fact, it's exactly what it should be. It's exactly how Clemson handles itself. These are very calculated moves. There's a lot of lawyering. There's a lot of understanding the grant of rights. There's a lot of working backdoor behind the scenes. So to say that Clemson it's scary they're being so quiet, I don't think is anywhere near reality. I think Clemson being quiet is a good sign. Let Florida State wave the banner. Let Florida State take the role of, boisterous, loud, look at us. Hey, we're over here for sale. Come get us. Because that's what that stuff was yesterday. It was basically a sign. It was a message to the ACC that, hey, not making enough money to be here. 2, we think we've got a way out of the grant of rights. And 3, come get us, Big Ten, SEC, whichever one feels powerful and strong enough to do it. So Clemson's not doing that. Clemson's not putting itself out there. And you might confuse that with Clemson's doing nothing. I don't think that could be further from the truth. I think, I know, I believe, right? I know that Florida State wants out of the ACC. They flat out said that. I think Clemson is closer in line with Florida State than some might think. Just because Clemson isn't saying the things publicly that Florida State is, does not mean that Clemson doesn't feel the way that Florida State does. Not saying that they absolutely do either, but we just assume because they're being quiet, then they don't feel that way. I'm not so sure about that. I think Clemson works quietly anyway. And you look at how a lot of these moves have gone down. USC, UCLA last summer to the Big Ten. You saw Oklahoma and Texas get out of the Big 12 to go to the SEC beginning next year, back 2 summers ago. And you didn't know those were coming. Oklahoma and Texas weren't openly shopping themselves. They weren't beating their chest, saying, look at the brand we are, look at who we are, look at what we can command out there in another league. They weren't doing any of that. It was all behind the scenes, it was all closed doors. So because one school takes a more bravado approach to things doesn't mean that other schools aren't doing anything. So do I think Clemson is working on the ACC's grant of rights, working on potential move to another league? I think you're crazy to say otherwise. I think Clemson is proactive. I think Clemson is intelligent when they handle this kind of stuff, and I think they're calculated. And Clemson's not going to get, quote unquote, as Florida State, let's call it, left behind. I don't think the Tigers are going to do that. I don't think this athletic department is for that. I don't think that the administration is for that. But when you talk about these things openly, Florida State with their brand, do I think Florida State has a brand? Absolutely. Go look at ratings. I know Florida State's not been great the last 5 years, but they command ratings. Their game against Florida, too. I mean, Florida was awful last year. They played on a Friday night, which is not a traditional sports night, a Friday night game during rivalry week, the day after Thanksgiving. And it was the second most watched game of rivalry week, behind only Ohio State and Michigan. So they still command eyeballs. Clemson has a huge brand, and Clemson doesn't need to shop its brand. All right. Clemson did not even make the playoffs the last 2 years, and they litter the top 5, the top 10 in ratings each week for college football last season. And that was with a team that a lot of people thought wasn't very good. They still won 10 games, got to the 10-win plateau the last 2 years, but they didn't make the playoff, and they're still a brand. So Clemson knows that. Clemson doesn't need to tell you they're a brand. Now, Florida State's been a little quieter, right? They went 10-3 last year. The 5 years previously, they were not in the national hunt. They were not relevant nationally. But it hasn't been a decade. It's been 5 years. They won the title in 2013. They finished in the top 15 the next 3 seasons in the final polls. They won 10 wins each of those 3 years, and then the wheels fell off when Jimbo Fisher let it slide, let it go at Florida State. Then Willie Taggart, now Mike Norvell. You know the rest of the story. But they bounced back and went 10-3 last season, and they should be pretty doggone good this year. So I think that, we can't equate great with brand. But Clemson has proven both. Clemson has proven to be great. They've won 2 titles in the college ball playoff era, and the Tigers have proven to build an actual brand. The Paul, coast to coast. So they're going to be sought after if, when, how the SEC and the Big Ten start looking for more. Now, the Pac-12 plays a role in this. We got to see what happens. Does Arizona, essentially leave the Pac-12, leaving it the Pac-9, and does that then force Arizona State or Utah out? What do you do with Oregon and Washington? The Big Ten, quote unquote, predatory. They don't want to be considered that, but they're going to pounce if that Pac-12 falls apart. You got to think they're going to go after some teams there. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 4. The SEC sitting tight right now. They seem very quiet. Doesn't mean they aren't doing things behind the scenes, but they're not openly shopping. They're not window shopping right now publicly. Maybe they're talking to people behind the scenes. We don't know. But I think Clemson is in a really good position. I think the Tigers are sitting there knowing that they have that brand, and that if expansion occurs and leagues want to create, a power 2 only, Clemson is not getting left out of that. There's obviously the ACC grant of rights, and that's a huge roadblock. And Florida State has kind of dismissed some of that, which is interesting. I don't know that they found the secret formula to getting out of it necessarily, but they aren't as concerned about it. $120 million exit fee. Clemson could pay that. I don't think they want to right now, but they can afford that. But then you've got to buy back your grant of rights, and it can be anywhere from $260 million up to $450 million. What you end up paying in between there may depend on what you do in a court. Litigation would have to occur. So I think that if you're Clemson, Do you need to make a decision before the August 15th deadline, which is 2 weeks away? Do you need to make a decision by then on what you want to do as a league? Because you have to inform the ACC by August 15th if you're leaving for next season. I don't think they have to do that. I think they've got enough time to ride this out a little bit. Look, the money disparity is going to occur cumulatively. It's going to happen over a long period of time. The concern is not the Big Ten making $30 million more dollars next year. It's the Big Ten making $30 million more dollars the year after, and the year after, and the year after that. And then over a 10-year period, you're talking about a whole lot of money. Do you want to be $300 to $400 million behind teams in other leagues? Of course not. But you don't have to necessarily react right this minute. And you can't leave the ACC. You can't try to break that grant of rights and get out and pay the exit fee and deal with the litigation until you know where you're going. And as far as we know, despite rumors, there's nothing reported that says anybody's coming to get Clemson or Florida State. Now, Florida State has put the for sale sign up in Tallahassee. Come get us. Clemson has not. I still think, though, that Florida State and Clemson and their trajectory, what they want to be, how they want to be perceived, what their brands are, and what their worth is very similar. It's very in line. So I still think Florida State and Clemson, we've seen this effect in realignment. It's like Noah's Ark. You got to go in twos. Well, I think Clemson and Florida State would be the pair. The question to me is not necessarily how or what do they do. It's when. Because I actually buy Florida State and what they said yesterday. This is inevitable that you're going to have to get. You can't play the deficit game for the next decade. And this granted rise in the ACC is lasting until 2036. They have 13 more years of this. Man, that's just a lot of cash to get behind him. So I don't know that it happens in 2 weeks. I've said on the record on this channel that I don't think Clemson's in the ACC in 5 years. I stand by that. Are they in there 2 years from now? I don't know what the timeline looks like. And it feels a little early for Florida State to go ahead and make that move. But I just have a feeling that when Florida State is ready to make its move, Clemson will be prepared as well. And that's what I think. That's what I believe. I don't know that. I'm not reporting it. I don't have factual information to give you on that. But putting it all together, putting the puzzle pieces together, I just think these two schools are more in line than you might think. And I think Clemson's in a good position because they're not having to do the dog and pony show, but everybody knows who they are. And if Florida State says, hey, we can get out of the ACC, and other conferences start calling and saying, is this true? Like, what we have to do? What do we got to do on our end? You think they're going to call Clemson too? Of course they are. So in some ways, I think Florida State spoke for Clemson in some ways yesterday during that meeting, but I think it could help Clemson. So the Tigers, I don't think are going anywhere now. I think it's just not enough time to work all the issues out and have a suitor ready to take you. But I do think it's coming before too long. Will Clemson have to pay a lot of money to the ACC? Yes. Will it be worth it in the end? Probably so, because if you're already in the Big Ten or the SEC and you're having to share your revenue, so say you're making $70 million a year, 30 of that going to the ACC, 40 of that going to you. That's not a lot more than you were making in the ACC. It's a little bit more. It's not a lot. But after you pay that grant of rights off in, say, 10 years, that's still 3 years before the grant of rights even end. You pay that off, say, $300 million. You're now raking in all of that money, and it probably goes up. It probably goes 70, 80. It probably escalates a little bit. So now all of a sudden you've got all of that money coming in at once, and you're not having to worry about trying to go find a league after you bought out your grant of rights. You're in the league. You're established. You have anything to worry about. So these athletic directors and these school presidents, it's all about forward thinking. Can they compete now? Is the disparity now that great? No. Money doesn't win everything. Money doesn't solve everything in college athletics or in the NFL or in the NBA or Major League Baseball or any sport. You gotta do good with your money and you got to hire the right people and recruit the right people and know how to play the game. But it can show up over a certain amount of time. And that's why if you position yourself now, there's no drop off and there's no hope and waiting for the conference to dissolve or whatever. You got to look at what's best for you. And at the end of the day, I think Florida State and Clemson, what's best for both of those schools might be working together. And I wouldn't be surprised if they, in some point, in some way, that becomes more evident as we go through realignment. It's here. It's not going anywhere. I don't think we're even going to recognize some of these landscapes 5, 10 years from now. The question is just how quickly does it occur? No, and that's the thing. I don't think anyone knows the time frame. I don't think anybody working behind the scenes can tell you a good solid time frame. So sit tight. Stay tuned in to allclemsontigers.com. Of course, if we find out any real information, anything that's breaking news, that's really hard reporting, we'll bring it to you as soon as we get it. We'll have videos up on the All Clemson channel here on YouTube, so make sure you subscribe to that as well, and we'll keep you updated on what's going on. But I just feel like I need to share my thoughts of where things are, kind of piece some things together for you. Maybe it helps ease some of your concerns. Maybe it made it way worse. I have no idea. I don't want to make things worse on anybody, but I just think that to think that it's scary that Clemson isn't being as brash and bold or as public as Florida State, I don't think that's a problem. I think it's in line with how Clemson operates, how they do business, and I think they're working really hard to do business the right way in this situation. So I'm Brad Singa for allclemsontigers.com. Go check out the website. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. I'll talk to you next time.